Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I have this fun spring card for you guys using my Mission Gold watercolors that I just did a first impressions sort of review on. If you haven't seen that video yet, I will link to it below the video in the description box. So this is my very first attempt using these. Yeah, I've already squeezed all the tube colors into the palette, which I showed in the previous video. And then I'm just mixing up to start off with a couple of the shades of yellow. And picking them up, I'm using a silver size 4 brush. And then this pre-printed panel is from Simon Says Stamp. This is the little Spring Has Sprung pack by Susie Plantamira. And yeah, it's pre-printed onto Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock. So just for information purposes, I don't have too much trouble watercoloring these. I've used other mediums as well. I did my very first video for this the little Spring and Easter series. Used these panels, and I did 3 different types of mediums on them. So yeah, for this one I'm using the Mission Gold, and I started off with this tulip. So I did the 2 yellows, and then I picked up some red and dropped that in while it was still wet, and I just love how that turned out. Like, it just, the way it started to spread into the yellow, it took on a mind of its own, and I love the way it did that. In the end, I took a couple close-up shots and you can kind of see how it's just gorgeous. So I tried not to play with it too much. I wanted to take off a little bit there near the tip of the flower. I didn't want as much red there, but other than that, I tried to leave it and let it just do its own thing and not mess with it too much, because the way it was spreading was just absolutely gorgeous. So for the rest of the watercolor, I just sped it up quite a bit. I worked a little lighter on the rest of this, just kind of experimenting a bit with layering colors. And because they're daffodils and, very pale as it is, like just nice yellows, I just layered on the lighter yellow and then worked on kind of like different areas. I didn't worry too much about the main petals themselves bleeding into each other. And then as those were drying, I went on and started doing like the stems and the leaves. So I mixed up a few different greens from the palette for those. And yeah, nothing too groundbreaking. I'm still experimenting with like just doing layers and layering colors and that sort of thing. For the most part right now, I'm doing more just layering, not so much layering completely different colors. So like with greens, I pretty much stick with green. With yellows, I stick with yellow. I'm not layering, purple over red or that sort of thing, if you know what I mean. So I just kind of went back and forth with each area as they were kind of starting to dry, and then would add in a little bit more color and kind of mess around with it a little bit. Again, trying not to overwork everything and overthink everything. And then for the daffodils, I actually ended up adding a bit of white on the edges of the petals, and then letting that sort of bleed into and mix with the yellow, because I just wanted a paler look, and plus I was curious to see how that would all work, and it worked. So once I was happy with those, I went back in with the leaves and added an even darker green and layered that on top of everything. And once everything was completely dry, like, I ended up walking away from this and letting it completely air dry, rather than, speeding up with my heat tool, because it does change the look of things if you use your heat tool to dry watercolors. So I let it air dry, and then I watered down one of the blues, like got it very, very watered down. And then I wet the areas here in between the stems and the leaves, so they are very, very wet, and then dropped in just a little bit of that blue and kind of let it spread out and do its own thing, trying to get a very pale look, just kind of the hint of a background. I didn't want to go all the way around and do a full-on background. 1, it would take too long, and 2, I have a tendency to overdo it. So I wanted to try and keep things pale and just leave as is. So I think this time I somewhat accomplished that, but let that dry. And then as I was doing that, I mixed up kind of an orange to watercolor in the letters on the bottom here. The Spring Has Sprung. So I used some oranges to do that. And then I took the yellow and very lightly with the edge of it went through the finer letters, which I don't even know if you can see on camera, but there are little spaces there kind of in between them. So I just went over that with a bit of the yellow, and then had to add some splatters, of course. So I just really loaded up my brush with first yellow and then some of the orange, and then just tapped it against my fingers to create a splatter all across this. And then same thing, just let it sit and dry. I came back, because I think the next day, me just running around with my kids and doing things. So I came back to it once it was completely dry, And then I used my paper trimmer to trim off the edges because this is a standard A2 size already. It's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I just trimmed off each edge. And then I have some of my favorite things. This is their Orange Zest cardstock. So it's orange. I absolutely love this cardstock. It's gorgeous. So I cut it in half. So it was 4 1/4 by 11 inches and then scored it at 5 1/2 with my Teflon bone folder. So I've got a standard A2 size card. And used a sanding block to sand off the edge of the watercolor the paper there, just because my paper trimmer blade's starting to go dull, and as usual I try and get the most out of it. So I have a quick tip video from a long time ago that I'll just use a sanding block to sand the edges if they're getting a little bit frayed and rough from an old paper trimmer blade. So do that, and then I grabbed some doodle twine from my stash and wrapped that around a couple times around the panel, and then tied that into a bow. This time not using my little tweezers to hold the knot. Whatever floats your boat. The tweezers do definitely help to hold the knot in place while you fiddle with the bow, but more often than not I'm able to just do it with my fingers. But the tweezers do make it quicker and easier. And then I pulled out my Pretty Pink Posh, these little clear droplets, which I've had for a while. I'd shown in a haul video, and they've been sitting on my desk ever since. So it was high time I finally started using them, and they're perfect for a card like this because they make me think of little raindrops. So I just arranged them onto the card where I wanted, and of course I went a little bit overboard with them. I couldn't add just 3, I had to add 6. And then I think I ended up adding one more at the very end. I have my card sitting in front of me. Did I or didn't I? No, I didn't. I did think later off camera I was going to add another one to make it an uneven number, but then I was like, I would end up not stopping. So I had to adhere them with some Ranger Multimedia matte adhesive. And then I popped this onto the card with some foam tape, and that finished it off. So this time I didn't finish the inside. I know, crazy, but I just wanted the watercoloring and all that to speak for itself, so I left it like that. So as always, there will be links below the video to my blog post, links to all the supplies used. Check that out below if you're interested. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.